Welcome to the webinar, everyone. We will get started in just a few minutes. Hi, everyone. Thank you again for joining us for our webinar. Before we go over the presenter and agenda information, I'd like to highlight some technical information specific to the webinar platform. You should be seeing something like this on your own computer desktop. To the left is the GoToWebinar viewer through which you're seeing this presentation. To the right is the GoToWebinar control panel, where you can ask questions and select audio mode. You're listening in using your computer's speaker system by default. If you would prefer to join over the phone, just select telephone in the audio pane, and the dial-in information will be displayed. If you see the orange arrow in the control panel on the right side of your screen, feel free to right-click the orange arrow and have access to the entire control panel throughout this webinar. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. Please feel free to send in your questions at any time during the presentation. I will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So now let's get to know the presenters for today's webinar. My name is Nikola Pavelić, and I have been a program manager at Cities of Service for a year and a half. Prior to Cities of Service, I worked as a community engagement coordinator in the Human Rights Department for the City of Dubuque in Iowa. But the main star of today's webinar will be James Wagner. James is the Chief of Performance Strategy and Innovation for the City of Tulsa. In this role, he leads a group that uses data to align citywide strategies and objectives towards priority goals set by the mayor and the city council, while also lowering barriers to adopting innovative practices. We're so excited to bring Tulsa to your screens. This webinar will be recorded and emailed to you along with a quick 4-question survey. So now let's look and see how we're going to spend our hour together. First, we will go over key information about Cities of Service for anyone that is new to our coalition. Then I will provide an overview of the Engaged Cities Award and the Urban Data Pioneers Engagement Strategy, which was our one of the winners for the last year's award. This will lead us into James's presentation, and then we'll end with the Q&A session. Cities of Service mission is as follows. Cities of Service is a nonprofit organization that helps mayors build strong cities by changing the way local government and citizens work together. We help our coalition cities tap into the citizen insights, skills, and services to identify and solve critical public problems. So how did we get started? We were founded by Michael R. Bloomberg in 2009 and incubated at the Bloomberg Philanthropies. Cities of Service became an independent organization in 2014 to meet increasing demand from cities for our services. We now support a coalition of more than 250 cities representing more than 73 million people across the Americas and Europe. Some of you might be thinking, Nikola, how does Cities of Service define citizen? Because you've heard me use that word a few times now. Cities of Service defines citizens regardless of their legal status as residents who actively participate in their community and who see themselves as an integral part of their city. Using our citizen engagement model, Cities of Service helps coalition cities partner with local citizens, city agencies, and community organizations to identify priority challenges that can be addressed with the help from citizens. We took what we learned about citizen engagement over the years and created this model, which is comprised of 5 key elements. The first 2 elements are leadership and identifying a challenge. We start with the belief that the elected city leaders have the perspective needed to identify the challenges of top priority for the city. Next, deliberation with the community. Before a city takes on a task, implements a solution, or creates a policy, Cities of Service encourages cities to deliberate with its citizens. We have found that the act of deliberation ultimately allows a community and its local government to develop common goals to help solve public problems. Next is getting to work. After deliberating with the community, city leaders and citizens come together to take action. This is about working together side by side with your citizens. And last but not least, it's about showing impact. So the work is happening, but in order to talk about the difference made, there need to be measures. We believe that measuring your impact helps cities point concrete results and tell the world how the partnership between the city and citizens has made a powerful difference. We have a number of engagement strategies that fall within this model on our website. We refer to these engagement strategies as blueprints. After the webinar, please feel free to check them out under the resource page. And our website, in case you are not aware of it, is citiesofservice.org. Over the years, we have noticed that more and more cities are engaging citizens to address specific public problems. Cities everywhere are facing an array of public challenges, including lack of resources to analyze data, homelessness, health disparities, and more. On November 7th, 2017, we launched the first Engaged Cities Award. Now in its second year, this international recognition program elevates the diverse ways that cities are actively engaging their citizens to solve these and other critical public problems. The award amplifies the most effective solutions, enabling other cities to learn from, adopt, and improve upon them. We are currently accepting applications for the award until January 18th. To learn more and apply, please visit the website that is on your screens. We became very familiar with James Wagner's work thanks to the Engaged Cities Award. When we saw the city's application, we were blown away by it. James and his colleagues welcomed citizens to help with data analysis in order to assist the city with creating policies and programs that address local challenges like income disparity and crime. We thought this was amazing. They called the strategy Urban Data Pioneers, and it became one of the 3 2018 Engaged Cities Award winners. If you want to learn more about the Urban Data Pioneers strategy, please check out our website at citiesofservice.org, then click on Resources from the home page. We have published a step-by-step blueprint which explains how your city can bring the Urban Data Pioneers strategy to your citizens. It's a pretty fantastic strategy. Today, however, we will spend time on a new program. James will be speaking about the Civic Innovation Fellowship, which is designed to bring citizens even deeper into the public problem solving. James, thank you so much for making time to share your work and insights with us. Please take it away.
All right, thank you so much, Nikola. Let me make sure that you can see my screen. Are you able to see that? See the screen?
We got it.
Okay, great. Well, I'll just jump in and thank you so much for that introduction. It's been a really wonderful working with Cities of Service and the team there over the last year, and actually really the success of the program that I'll talk about today is due in part to the resources that we now have from the Engaged Cities Award. So let me just kind of outline what I'd like to achieve today in terms of the goals of the presentation. One is to highlight the problem that is growing actually with trust between government and its citizens. Local government, I think, is uniquely situated to really build trust with citizens, and I hope that this kind of encourages you in how we can do that. Two is to demonstrate the real desire. I think sometimes we underestimate how much desire there is for citizens to engage with local government. Often they just don't have a clear path to do that. And then third is just to kind of highlight what we've done here as a potential model for how we can address those things. So first, kind of starting with what we kind of perceive as the problem. One of the things that happened early on in the administration that I'm a part of is that people were really excited about this administration, but they would often ask the question, how can I get involved, or how can I help? And we do have some pathways for that, as I'm sure all of you do that work in local government. Obviously, there's authorities, there's boards and commissions that city governments have that residents and citizens can participate in. For the most part, though, those are monthly boards. They are policy-making bodies, and that works for some people in terms of that level of engagement. But there are people that want to engage at a deeper level. There are also traditional volunteer opportunities. We have, through the help of Cities of Service, a website now called Serve Tulsans that engages residents and helps people connect to volunteer opportunities. But even with that, we really heard that people wanted it to even go deeper in terms of getting involved with what's happening in local government beyond those opportunities. And so we just didn't feel that there was a real clear path for that, and we wanted to create that. Urban Data Pioneers, as Nikola mentioned, is part of that. But we wanted to really create something that was honestly even more intensive and perhaps built up local leaders that become leaders in government in the future. The other truth that we know is that a lot of the polling that has been done over the years shows that there is not a lot of trust in government, really at every level. Local government tends to fare a little bit better, but still fewer than 1 in 4 people feel that they have a great deal of trust and confidence in local government. So we know that we have work to do there in terms of building trust, which is part of the model that Nikola just talked about. So we created a program that we're calling the Civic Innovation Fellowship. And really, it exists to develop talented civic innovators who engage with city officials to co-produce solutions for the Tulsa's toughest challenges. And really, that word co-produce is really important because we feel that while people that have been in city administration for a long time have a lot of great perspective on how to get things done in City Hall, sometimes the solutions or the solution set is pretty limited because we don't fully understand what the needs are for the people that we're solving for. So that's a really important component of this. In terms of what we want to achieve for the future, Tulsa's challenges are routinely and deeply understood and solved by dozens of engaged residents. We have a cohort of 6 people that I'll talk about in a few minutes, but we want this to become essentially the expert citizens that are helping us solve problems routinely. So these 6 in this cohort will then advise the next cohort of people that will go through this program in the spring. I do want to give credit to the inspiration really for this program came from a couple of places. One is a program called the Mind Fellowship, which I had the opportunity to participate in 2015, and that's a program of the University of Oklahoma that actually takes place here in Tulsa. And the Mind Fellowship is focused on combining the best of entrepreneurial innovation and sustainability with the social sector's compassion and empathy. So that was a real experience in terms of combining those 2 skill sets, and a lot of the program is really built on the Mind Fellowship's model. The other is a book that some of you may be familiar with that came out last year called The New City OS. And this is a book by Stephen Goldsmith and Neil Kleiman that really discusses how the city can become a hub for coordination with residents, contractors, community organizations, nonprofits, and for-profits. There's a really great passage in this book that says, by turning outward, cities can raise their trust in the eyes of residents, augment their data with more and better information to make smarter decisions, and find new partners to deliver specific services in more efficient ways, and hear and collaborate on exciting new approaches to addressing urban challenges. And really that entire book really kind of encouraged us to think differently about how we solve problems at City Hall. And we really want to emphasize where we kind of got some of the inspiration for this. So next, we'll kind of talk about the goals that we set when we started this fellowship. The first is about creating an environment for innovative problem solving. And so we kind of boiled that down to 3 areas. One is convening, so having City Hall be that hub, as I just mentioned. 2 is tools, so enabling the people that are engaging in this with the set of tools that we're learning about and giving to our own City Hall employees. And then 3rd, feedback, and that is a constant feedback loop, so that as the program is going, that the Civic Innovation Fellows have an opportunity to refine their project. Second is to empower residents to engage with municipal government. This kind of model we kind of borrowed from a book called Drive by Daniel Pink. And in that book, he talks about the need for autonomy, so essentially being able to take a team and work together independently, being able to master a new set of skills, and our tools is really how we connect with that, and finally purpose. And one of the great things about working in local government is it is almost everything we do has a really deep purpose involved with it, and I think I attribute that to the success of this and also the Urban Data Pioneer program. That people are really able to engage in a way that really is truly meaningful, and a lot of times it really augments what they're doing in their professional roles elsewhere in terms of purpose. So next, I'll kind of dig into the nuts and the bolts of how what the Civic Innovation Fellowship really is and what we do. So there's really 2 sides. So first is recruiting the fellows themselves. And so what we did is we started with a really simple interest form that said, would you be interested in helping the city to solve really intractable problems over a 6-month period? And really that was about all there was. We got quite a bit of interest from that, a little over, I think, 75 people submitted interest forms for that. And then we followed up with an application that was much lengthier, that really got into some specifics of the availability for time and that sort of thing. And then from that, we had 46 people that applied. And I just want to be clear that we were real upfront about the time commitment here. We meet, and I'll show a slide in just a minute about this, but we meet every Tuesday for 3 hours for 24 weeks. So in the application, it was no secret that it would be that level of time commitment, and yet we still had 46 really qualified people that applied, which I think kind of goes to the earlier point about that we underestimate the level of interest that people have in giving back to their local government. Finally, we had a committee review those 46 applications and make recommendations, and then we selected 6 from those 46 applicants. On the other side, we had a process for selecting projects. So we needed to find a project that really had 4 elements inside City Hall. Obviously, someone who is a cooperative project sponsor. In the case that I'll show you in just a minute, it was our Working in Neighborhoods department. Some of you may call it code enforcement, but that department was very eager to work with us, and so that was really helpful. Second is a complex and adaptive problem. That is not a technical problem. So not a matter of just tweaking a system or making a small improvement in an accounts payable system or something like that, but something that's truly really multifaceted and complex, often involving human behavior. And these are the kind of problems that are very difficult for cities to solve internally. Third is broad interest. So we didn't want it to be something that was so narrowly focused that that anyone who was selected wouldn't be interested. So we wanted to make sure that we chose a project that no matter who you were, you could see how you could be affected by this problem, or someone that you know could be affected by this problem. And then fourth, important but not urgent. So you know, if it was a problem that needed to be solved immediately, we couldn't wait 6 months to come up with a set of solutions. Rather, we needed to come up with a project that had a broad impact but didn't need to be solved quite so urgently. So in terms of the three elements, the first is a place to convene. So this program took place over 24 weeks. This is a photo of the room that we use. This is our boardroom in City Hall, and so we would convene here every week. We met at 4 o'clock, which tended to be a good time because people could leave work a little bit early, and then we would make sure to feed them dinner as a result of them being there over the dinner hour. And so this was the place that we put together to do that. In terms of the format of the meeting, we would typically start at 4, and we would have just a time of kind of getting together and convening and having some drinks. And then we would always have what we call a 2-minute elevator update, which essentially was an opportunity for each of the 6 fellows to rotate through and give a 2-minute update on where they were on the project. So describing the problem, describing what their assumptions were to date about that problem, and then talking about the solutions that they had that they were thinking about at that time. And that was a really good opportunity to do a couple things. One is to practice being succinct and describing what they're working on, and two, for everyone to get on the same page again as we met every week. Then we would have usually a topical training. So I'll talk a little bit more about the specifics that we did there in just a moment. And then we would take a break and have dinner and then go into project work for the last hour and a half or so. So the tools that we really sought to provide here were pretty broad, and we partnered with a lot of different people to make this happen. So we wanted to first make sure that the teams that maybe had never worked on projects before where they were working in a team had some good project management skills. So we brought in someone who does consulting for this. They were able to just donate their time and give the fellows kind of a project management 101. That was one of the first sessions. We had a couple of sessions on human-centered design. We were lucky enough to be able to partner with the University of Tulsa to have them come in and give 2 hour-and-a-half-long sessions on how to do human-centered design, which is basically understanding the real needs of who you're solving for and going out and really doing a lot of data collection through interviews and experiencing the problem firsthand. We also have a robust program in Lean Six Sigma, so we talk about how to improve processes, how to identify waste in processes. We gave some training on using behavioral science, which was a framework that we were introduced to through the Behavioral Insights team, and also provided a lot of data to the team and some data analytics training on that as well to do low-cost evaluations if they wanted to try to test and prototype something. And then finally, we had our planning department talk to the fellows about public engagement strategies. So they were able to get some ideas about how to engage the public if they were going to do a focus group or do a town hall type meeting to discuss the problem. And then we had a series of trainings on how City Hall works. We really wanted people to come away from this not just knowing about this specific problem that they were working on, but on the basics of how City Hall works. And of course, it's hard to do that in just 3 hour-long sessions, but we did our best to kind of get to the big picture elements and talked about how the city prioritizes what it does. So in terms of feedback, we had 2 ways that the teams would receive feedback throughout the process. One is that we would have an informal review with my office has an advisory committee. So we would bring them in, and that would be just basically like an informal discussion of the problem, the assumptions that they were making, the data that they had analyzed, and then the solutions they were thinking about. And this was just a way to make sure that the team was on track and didn't go into kind of the realm of something that would just not be possible, either from a legal perspective or from kind of maybe a regulatory perspective. And then we had more formal progress reviews 3 times throughout the 24-week period. And with that, we would bring in the client. So in this case, it was the Working in Neighborhoods department. And we'd also bring back that same group of people, the advisory committee and the mayor's office staff. And this would be a more formal presentation where the fellows got some practice on presenting their solution, even though it was still a work in progress, and had an opportunity to receive feedback. And that was a way that the team got to iterate quite a bit on some of the things that they were thinking about. So this is just another look at that, just maybe in a more visual perspective. So we would have 2 digs and 3 progress reviews, and then leading up to the final presentation, which actually for this cohort was last night, we had 2 dry runs where they would go through and present the entire project as if we had a full complement of people there as well. So I want to talk a little bit about the specific project that this team worked on. So this was our first cohort to go through this, and just to kind of give you an idea of who they were, we had an architect, a college professor, a high school teacher, the director of a regional STEM alliance, the chief operating officer of a local nonprofit, and the founder of a charter school. So that was our group that we had working. The photo that you see here is from one of the human-centered design exercises that we went through with the University of Tulsa. So that's kind of who our first cohort was. So the specific problem that they were working on was reducing code violations and increasing the number of cases of code violations that were voluntarily taken care of by residents. So they framed the problem as that code violations decreased home values in neighborhoods. So when I talked about that broad impact, that was something that everyone could identify with, whether this was a passion problem for them or not. It may not have been something that was even on their radar before, but really recognizing that when we have code violations in neighborhoods, it really works to the detriment of an entire neighborhood. That was something everybody could get on board with and be passionate about working on. And then the other piece of it is just from a taxpayer resource perspective. The process that we have is pretty labor intensive, and it costs quite a bit to do inspections and go back again to do a second inspection. And so the team really identified those as the key things that they were working on. And then they had a goal specifically from the recommendations of this project to reduce code violations by 5% and increase the number of what we call voluntary compliance by 5% as well. So they worked really hard to develop some personas that really described who was experiencing this problem. And the only way they were really able to do that is by doing a lot of on-the-ground work. So even though we were meeting every Tuesday night here at City Hall, in between, this team was going out and doing interviews and finding people who had been code violators in the past and doing focus groups with them. And so that was a pretty labor-intensive process, but it really led to this, to identifying these different personas that described kind of who they were solving for. So first was the don't know yets. These would be the people that maybe had moved from an apartment where there wasn't a yard to maintain to a new house as a renter or as a homeowner, but just didn't know some of the city's codes. And so they really identified 3 specific solutions for that group. So text notification, which I'll talk about here in just a moment, print materials that people would get when they first move in, and then an app that could potentially connect them with lawn care services that they'd be able to use. They had the won't complies, which would be the people who are the the violators that happen a lot. So one of the statistics that was really interesting as part of this is that 10% of the code violations in the city are from just 60 property owners. And so that was a pretty amazing statistic that we really only found because we were doing some of the data analysis in terms of who the violators were. So they have a specific set of solutions for that. The can't complies would be someone who either due to financial resources or just physical inability can't comply, can't maintain their lawn, or can't get rid of something that is a code violation. So again, they have specific solutions that address those. And then finally, leaders. These would be neighborhood leaders specifically, leveraging just the influence that neighborhood leaders have in order to address this problem in a better way. And an example there was coming up with a dashboard that neighborhood leaders could use to know where the city was in terms of a specific case on a property, which is something we don't have yet here in Tulsa. So you can really see how the work that they did is just truly multifaceted and really addresses what is truly a really complex issue with very specific solutions. So I'll just give you one example of the solutions that they arrived at. So on the left, you'll see that there's a text notification. This is something we were able to stand up and test pretty quickly. And what we did is we essentially put together our two databases. So we had a database of the people who were, or the addresses for which people were complaining on a code violation, and then we had a database of the utility bill customers, two different databases. We matched the addresses and then send a text message to the customer on the utility bill just saying a code violation for tall grass has been reported at this address. And then if they replied yes, which gave us a marker for whether or not they engaged with that text, we would send them a text that said, for a list of lawn services, please visit this URL. And we specifically called out, we have a small business enterprise program that promotes small businesses in the city. And so we specifically called out the contractors that were lawn care and landscape contractors that were in our small business program for that, to highlight them. So, and I'll show you the kind of the results of that in just a moment. The other thing we had was just a connection to an app that would easily enable people that potentially would have a code violation to easily get their lawn taken care of. So this would be, not to overuse the cliche, but it's like the Uber for lawn care. So this was another strategy that they used. So in terms of looking at the results, the text notification pilot, we compared the data for voluntary compliance from the last 4 years to this year for the 4-week time period that we did this text notification pilot, and we saw a 24% improvement in the voluntary compliance just by telling people that they potentially even had a code violation. So we didn't even have an inspector go out yet. We just told them that there's been, a report that there's been a code violation. So just that alone, and very easy to do, very inexpensive to do that, increased the compliance by 24%. So just to kind of wrap up, I did want to provide a link here for all the materials that we used is in a Google Drive, and I would welcome anyone to look at that. This link is case sensitive, so you'll want to type a capital T and a capital CIF. But if you're interested in kind of seeing the syllabus that we put together, if you're interested in seeing the project scope, what we call the project charter, I guess, all of that material is there, as well as a lot of interview material that the fellows used for all this. And if you want to look through that, that would be a great resource to kind of drill down and see what we were working with in terms of the documents. So with that, I'll wrap up and I'll turn it back to Nikola for questions.
Fantastic. Thank you, James, very much. You're getting a lot of hand claps that you can't hear, I'm assuming. So as James mentioned, let's jump into the questions. Remember to go ahead and submit your questions into the question pane to the right of your screen that you're observing right now. So I will take a minute to look through the questions that have been submitted, and we'll go over them. Okay, we have one question that said, how was the review committee selected and established? The one, I'm assuming this was referring to the review committee that then selected who was going to be part of this experience.
Yeah, great question. So the committee was it's called the OPSI, or that's the acronym, Office of Performance Strategy and Innovation Advisory Committee. This was actually a committee that was appointed by the mayor. When we created this office, the mayor appointed, I think it was around 12 people to basically serve in an advisory capacity for our office. So we leveraged them a lot to do things just like this, where we need to get input on a program that we're either thinking about implementing or we want to improve. And so this was a perfect example of that. So the short answer is the mayor nominated these people.
Okay, perfect. Keep the questions coming. The next one, well, I think it's picking back off of your answer. Did you see any limitations with the mayor-appointed committee? I think it's trying to understand, like, is there any kind of drawback to that, or do you think it's not a problem because the mayor is loved by everyone?
No, I mean, I think it actually is a really pretty diverse committee in terms of experience and background. So it's kind of a blend of people who have worked in city government before, people that are in the sort of civic tech field, because that's one of the areas we engage with quite a bit, and just some kind of innovative thinkers in terms of people that are in the kind of in the private sector world. So it's a really well-functioning group. We keep them updated on the things that we're working on and engage them to help us think critically about the projects that we're doing at City Hall.
Cool. The next question has to do with the solutions that you shared. What happens with the solutions now?
Yeah, that is a great question. So as I mentioned last night, we presented these solutions to the main client, which is the director of our Working in Neighborhoods department. And so now the fellowship isn't quite over. The fellows still have a final report that they'll submit that essentially has a list of next steps for that department, as well as a couple others that are impacted by the recommendations. And so the next step would be that as the mayor's office, we would just start to work through what are the resources needed for implementation. Part of the reason we did this, the timing on this, just like we did, is we wanted to be able to incorporate any of these recommendations into our budget, which the official kind of process for creating our budget starts January 1st. So we wanted to time it just so that we would be able to have this information, have the pilots completed in order to inform the budget for the next year. Fortunately, one of the things that came up last night is that many of the solutions that were proposed are very low-cost solutions. They're really things like these text messages and sending out a little magnet for people when they sign up for utility bills. I mean, they're really pretty low cost. Some of them are no cost solutions. And so that's, I think, one of the benefits to taking an approach like this is that often some of the solutions that would come if you were just to do this project without the engagement of residents would be, pretty complex, and sometimes, a solution that might take months to kind of implement. And most of these, I think, are pretty easily implemented. In fact, the person who directs our refuge system approached me last night after the meeting and said, I think one of those flyers that your team recommended, we could have out on the street by next week. So pretty quick implementation and adoption of that idea that they had come up with.
Fantastic. The next question is around what you would like, what do you think you're going to improve for the next round in terms of either the demographics of the people that are in the room or how the problem is originally established? What are some things that you think you might improve next round?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to survey the fellows themselves and ask for their recommendations. What we did at the very beginning is we set out the very first session. We said, what are the expectations that you have from this experience and what are the concerns? And we're going to revisit those and really ask the question of, did we meet the expectations that they had, and did we address the concerns as they went through the program? So I think we'll be asking for input from them. We'll also be asking for input from the client, and this, and again, in this case, working in neighborhoods, to find out what their recommendations are, for improvement. So I think at this point we're not really sure, because we really need to process through that feedback loop, as it's just kind of wrapped up last night. But I think those ideas are kind of forthcoming.
Beautiful. And again, keep the questions coming. The next one has to do with marketing. What did you do to market the opportunity for residents? Sounds like you had a lot of applications, but how did you get the word out there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I inadvertently skipped over this whenever we talked about the recruitment process. We had the fortune of announcing this at an event that was sponsored by an organization called Leadership Tulsa, and they hosted an event called the Good News Summit, really as a way to highlight all the great things that were happening in Tulsa in all the different sectors, in government, in nonprofit, in the private sector. So on February 1st of this year, we announced this formally. We talked about the work that our office does, but then at the end said, if you want to become part of this, part of the work we're doing to improve Tulsa, here's a way you can engage. And so I think that was a real just opportune moment to announce that. And that's where we did that initial very short sort of interest survey that led to those 75 plus applicants. And then after that, we took the opportunity to really broadcast it on the city's social media channels, so that people would know that the opportunity existed. And we kept that open for a while. I think it was probably about 6 weeks. We kept the applications open so that people could apply for that.
Awesome. And this looks like this is the last question, unless another one pops up as you're answering this one. It sounds like you have really informed residents now and engaged residents. How will they be engaged moving forward by the city in other ways?
Yeah, another really fantastic question. As we wrapped up last night, I kind of gathered the 6 fellows and said, there's a good chance now that you'll be tapped for some things in the future. And I just asked them to be thinking about where they might want to engage, whether it is, serving on an authority board or commission, now that their knowledge is so deep on what happens, especially in terms of code enforcement, or, and I think really probably all of them will be engaged in advising the next cohort of Civic Innovation Fellows. So,
awesome.
so I think that, then, like I said, with that vision statement at the very beginning, really what we want to create is, dozens of people who are really well informed about what's happening in the city, but not just well informed, but meaningfully engaged, and not just for this 24-week period, but ongoing. So I hope that the people that were part of this continue to engage with us. I could see the potential of them, if they're interested, being added to our advisory committee for this office. I think that would be a huge add in terms of engaging them more regularly going forward.
Beautiful. Beautiful. That looks like those are all the questions that we've had. James, a big thank you again for your wealth of information and your commitment to engaging citizens in local government. Hopefully we'll have you on a future webinar again. If you would like to learn more about the services we provide to our coalition cities, or if you're interested in joining our growing coalition, please feel free to reach out to my amazing colleague Jessica through the email that's on your screen. And lastly, I want to thank all of you for attending today's webinar and for asking such great questions. As a reminder, you will receive an emailed recording of the webinar along with 4 questions. Please answer those 4 questions so that we can make sure that our webinars are meeting your needs. And with that said, we hope to see many of you at our future webinars, and I hope to read some of your Engaged Cities Award applications. All the best, everyone. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Nikola.
Bye.